Welcome to Speechless. We're live from SPNN in St. Paul, Minnesota. Want to welcome you here. Hey, you know what? The Syria situation is pretty serious. And, you know, the reports are 6 to 80 people have died. Who knows from these chemical attacks, whether they're chlorine or nerve agents or whatever. Pretty serious business, and the world should have an outcry. But we're coming live from 3 blocks from a place that used to or may still use saline solution. It's a chemical attack on babies, and approximately 260 babies were killed this last week. So we're right here in the heart of it, worse than Syria. And it's happening on a weekly basis here in St. Paul, Minnesota. So want you to keep things in perspective here. Again, not one NRA member has killed anybody, nor do they get government funding, but Planned Parenthood and the other abortion industries get government funding, and they kill a lot of people. And so our perspective, and in case people are wondering, you know, people talk about the judgment of God and it's coming. No, abortion is the judgment of God. One of the blessings or curses, there's blessings and curses in the covenants. We have blessings and curses in our laws. You violate the law, you get a curse. If you don't, the blessing, live free. But you violate it, here's the curse. We'll imprison you or fine you, take away your liberties. So we have those here, but in the Bible, one of the curses is being without child. So all these women that are aborting and men that support the abortion, it's a curse. And it's not only a curse on them, but it's also a curse on the people around them and their family members and society as a whole. All right, hey, we got big stuff happening here. We're going to finish up our session that we had last week on cameras in the courtroom. There's a legislative hearing. We're going to finish that at the end of the show, last half hour or so, or however long it takes me to get through this stuff. But we got breaking news on 2 issues. Hey, I got a breaking news CGI, Dallas, that you need to put up there. Forgot to tell you about it. Whoa, all right. Big deal. You might need to change that and whatever, but I'll change it. But, you know, if you want to be creative in the meantime, go ahead. Breaking news on 2 issues. All right, you can take that off and bring the other one. But Shahram Hadian, he ran for governor on the Republican ticket in the state of Washington. He's highly recognized in the state of Washington. He's an ex-Muslim, and he's now a Christian pastor. And so he knows the Muslim faith inside and out. Well, he was traveling around Minnesota and other places, and what's happening is he was going to be here Sunday with Worldview Weekend, but Worldview Weekend actually canceled the event due to an activity that has taken place. What is happening is CARE and the organization that supports Muslims, it's actually a terrorist organization. They have developed a strategy that if anybody's speaking against the Muslim faith and they're at a public facility or a private facility like a hotel, or if they're at a public facility, they will call the people managing that place and say, shut it down, there's going to be violence, there'll be threats. You know, so all this needs to be, the Secretary of the Attorney General in Minnesota needs to check into this because this is violence. To say one thing, to call and say, hey, I really don't want you to support this organization. If you do, I won't be using your services anymore. That's one thing. But to say, hey, we're going to throw rocks at your place, we're going to break windows, we're going to hurt people, that's a whole different ballgame. Those are crimes to make those type of threats. Well, that type of thing was happening. And so, but what CARE does is 2 days before the event is when they start. It's not a week before. And so Worldview Weekend and Shahram Hadian have no chance of making adjustments because what these facilities do is they call them up and say, hey, we're canceling your contract. We're not doing it. So there's no time to then go and have a different location. 1,500 people were registered to come to this event, not only with Worldview Weekend with Shahram Hadian, but 2 other former experts in the Muslim faith, former Muslims, were going to speak also, and they got shut down. So this is a pretty serious thing. They got shut down in Wisconsin, and I also believe, well, we showed the video where a person came loaded with guns, and that down in South Dakota, and that person got arrested and is now sitting in jail for his threats that he made. He posted it on Facebook, not too smart. Seemed like a nice guy, but he was upset, you know. And I guess if you've lived in a society where you haven't questioned or haven't had your faith questioned, and you can't question it, otherwise, or if somebody does question it, you get your head lopped off. You kind of have this we can do whatever we want attitude, and that kind of manifests itself. And so, you know, Muslims, will they become Americanized? Well, no, because their faith doesn't allow it. And so, anyway, let's show the video. This is Shahram Hadian talking about the events that took place.
Hi everyone, this is Pastor Shahram Hadian with the Truth and Love Ministry. I wanted to share with you today this special video announcement that I'm actually recording from the state of Minnesota. I've been here the last few days for some speaking engagements, and we were scheduled to have some other speaking engagements with Worldview Weekend, Brandon House's ministry, along also with Understanding the Threats, John Guandolo and Chris Gobbets. Our ministry, the Truth and Love Project, was supposed to be speaking in several cities along with them, and we were shut down. Who shut us down, folks? The Islamo-Marxist, fascist oppressors in this nation. The same groups that we've been warning you about, the same groups that we've been trying to travel around this nation and warn you about, shut us down. How did that happen? Started with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the front group for the Muslim Brotherhood. Then they've joined with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC. They started putting on their website within the last 48 hours to put calls into the venues and the hotels that we were going to be speaking, to get us shut down, to say we're going to protest, to potentially even hint at violence. Then they got Antifa involved. Antifa started getting their folks to call in and put pressure. And we know what Antifa does, right? We know their MO. They're domestic terrorists. And so because of this, in the last 48 hours, we got word that the event in Green Bay, Worldview Weekend's event in Green Bay, was canceled. The hotel pulled out within less than 36 hours. Then the hotel in Milwaukee canceled on us. A hotel where Brandon's been meeting for years. Then the city of Onalaska, where they were going to be meeting in La Crosse, canceled. And then finally, we decided, because the SPLC, that has listed our organization and many others as hate groups, they were calling local mosques, trying to get them riled up, to show up, to threaten our event, to protest our event, to make it dangerous. The hotel had already demanded that Brandon hire 2 police officers. It became too dangerous because Bloomington, Minnesota is a hotbed for Islamic radicalization. It is the #1 basically conglomeration of the Somali community. and it is the area where the most Somalis have been radicalized and have been going over to fight with ISIS and Al-Shabaab and so forth and so on. It was a dangerous place to begin with, and we did not feel we can trust law enforcement. The word that we got was the sheriff in that county has been compromised and is on the side of the jihadis. We were not sure if we could trust even the Bloomington Police Department, so we had to make a tough decision to finally cancel Bloomington. So folks, if you think that we are living in a free nation anymore, if you think this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, we better wake up soon. Religious liberty, the right of assembly, the right of our speech is gone. This is the MO now. This is the tactic that they are using to shut us down. And for the temporary time, it has worked, because they were able to intimidate these hotels and these venues to pull these contracts with less than 48 hours. There was no time to recover. There was no time to book somewhere else, and that's their MO. Are you ready for this, church? Are you ready for this, pastor? Are you ready for this, Christian? This is the new America that you're living in. And too many Christians are sitting in their churches, too many pastors are sitting in their pulpits thinking they're safe, they're fine, everything's good to go, and it's going to be coming to your neighborhood soon. It's going to be in your face soon. And who is aiding and abetting these Islamo-Marxists? Who is aiding and abetting these Islamo-fascists? Because isn't this fascism? Doesn't this remind you of 1930s Germany all over again? Didn't the Muslim Brotherhood work with the Nazis in World War II? This is their MO. Who's working with them? The interfaith coalitions, the liberal churches, like the ELCA church that was trying to protest and shut my event down a couple nights ago in Montevideo, Minnesota. By the way, good news, they couldn't do it. They couldn't succeed. And an event that the organizers were expecting maybe 100, 270 showed up, exceeding the capacity of the room. 10 or more pastors were there from the local communities. And we were able to share the message that the interfaith is a lie, interfaith is a scam, interfaith is simply a Trojan horse for the Islamo-Marxists to come into the churches and destroy and corrupt our message. Folks, this is critical that we get these messages out. And on that night, God was victorious. We got the message out. We're planning on coming back in the fall, doing some training. They're not going to run us out of town. They may have had a minor victory here, but they are not going to run us out of town. In fact, we're already planning on when we're going to come back to Minnesota. We're going to regroup and come back stronger. Because while the door is open, we're not going away. We're not going away. So I wanted to bring this announcement to you. I wanted to share with you what's going on. By the way, these are the headlines. Look at this headline. Hamas-linked care joins with the SPLC. With who? With Christian and Jewish groups to fight what? Anti-Muslim bigotry. This is the MO, folks. They're going to these churches, mobilizing Christian activists to turn on who? To turn on you and me. Conservative, Bible-believing Christians. We are the targets now. We're the targets. So this is their MO. We're not going away. And by the way, we are working on, I was on the phone with Brandon 2 hours yesterday. We are going to be working on a documentary. We're going to have national and international speakers put together a documentary on the Islamic threat, on the Muslim Brotherhood, on the Islamo-fascist coalition that's coming together, this Islamo-Marxist coalition. And, oh, by the way, we're going to be exposing the interfaith coalitions, including the likes of James White, who had this interfaith dialogue with Yasser Qadi. They're more worried about Muslims being supposedly persecuted than the actual persecution of Christians that is happening around the world and now in America, folks. If what happened to us this last 48 hours doesn't show you that there is Christian persecution in America, I don't know what will, until they start arresting us. Until they start coming in and shutting down our churches. Christian, wake up. Pastor, wake up. So stay tuned for more information about this documentary. We're already beginning the process of it. It's going to be filmed soon. And we're going to go on the offensive. We are not going to take this laying down. Just like we came after Sioux Falls last year, what happened to us there with the heavily armed Muslim man, we went on the offensive. We went public with it. We're going to go public with this. We're going to fight back because silence in the face of evil is evil itself. As believers, we cannot be silent. God bless you. Stay tuned. And by the way, please pray for our ministry. Please support the ministry. Allow us to continue to get this message out. Please pray and support Worldview Weekend and other ministries who are standing up. God bless you. We'll have more for you in the coming days. And keep up the good fight of the good faith.
All right, that was Shahram Hadian speaking at a Worldview Weekend event. He was supposed to. But the interesting thing to me there, of course, a lot of it, they were told to hire 2 police officers. Well, you got to do that once in a while. But the big issue was the Bloomington police was not cooperating in being able to hire police officers. Now, if you go to the Worldview Weekend website, you'll get more detailed information as to their point of view as to what took place, why Worldview Weekend said they weren't going to meet. So with the threats that were coming in, they just decided it was best to shut it down this time. There are a lot of websites. I'd go just Google what would Muhammad do, and also you'll find some video series. You'll also find some websites that talk about what Muhammad said to do. So a lot of misinformation going out, and that's why we in America, the best way, and we say the best way to fight misinformation is with more information. And so one of the things that also happened was that Saturday night, as Shahram Hadian mentioned, there are religious organizations going around pushing this peaceful Muslim religion belief, which is a total misunderstanding of the timeline of the Muslim faith. And people showed up to that, but there wasn't a whole lot of interaction going on. So people weren't allowed to interact is probably a better way to say that. And so one person afterwards said, hey, let's get a debate going. And that's what I want to do here. We're trying to get a debate going, not a debate, but an informational, or it could be a debate, but an informational thing on the Muslim faith, and hear it from a Muslim and get some of these people together and so you can hear it and you could understand it. But what I've seen so far in the press is people who do not understand the Muslim faith questioning Muslims. And when you got Taqiyya, which says you can lie as a Muslim to anybody, you can deceive in order to live peacefully until you take authority and take control, then lie all you want. So anyway, that's what's happening here in Minnesota, and you heard the warning by Shahram Hadian, and it's real. All right, we had a hearing today down at the legislature. I should say we, the people. There was a hearing by our representatives listening to a legislative auditor's report on the voter registration system. And it was a fascinating hearing. I'm working on it to get it up on the website, but I pulled one clip off, and because in my opinion, this report was a sham. The hard questions weren't asked, although from my understanding, the legislative auditors had the sources, had the information, knew where to go, were told where to go, and didn't do it. And so they kind of got called out on it today, not severely, but I'm going to show a tape here of Representative Quam politely calling them out. So let's run that tape.
I don't have any member questions at this point, but Representative Quam, others if you're interested.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Meyerhoff. Looking through the report, I didn't see, as part of HAVA in 303, there's a verification process, and that if you don't, for new registrants, and if you don't have a valid driver's license ID number, that then you would utilize the Social Security Administration has a link on their website, and the vast majority of states utilize the last four digits of the Social Security number along with the name, date of birth, and the other pertinent data to do a verification. during the year 2016, there were just under 160,000 verifications run through that site, and over 10% of those came back as being mismatched. I'm not seeing in here details of how many of those over 16,000 mismatches were actually eligible or found to be ineligible.
Ms. Meyerhoff, do you have any insight for us on that, or Ms. Randall?
Mr. Chair and Representative Quam, I do not. I'm not familiar with that section of HAVA, so I don't know if someone from the Secretary of State's office would be able to.
Representative Quam, follow.
Mr. Chair, it's not inconsequential that there were, and this is used by states. It's a national setup. It's made to comply with HAVA. In fact, they even call it Help America Vote Verification. And the Social Security Administration, has a fairly extensive database. And it's not just if things don't match, it also flags if there are people that are deceased and other things. And it's a, backup to the integrity of the system. And I also, on that site, you can check weekly reports, and that election week of 2016, over 12.5% that were submitted were mismatched. And the week after, which I would think would probably include some of the same-day registrants, there are 16 states that have same-day registration. And so there's quite a bit of utilization probably after the fact. And the week after, 30% of those that were put in for verification failed. And so I assume that since the report was on voter registration, that the auditors would have checked, this federally required and actually, implementable and accessible that states across the nation are utilizing, and especially if we're, as a state, using it for, in that calendar year, about 160,000 new voter registrations, and that over 16,000 came up as being mismatched. I would have thought that would have been a very appropriate component of the audit. So the auditors aren't familiar and didn't verify, and this wasn't part of any of the audit activity, this verification of voter registration. Is that what or is there somebody else within the auditors group that may be able to answer whether they actually did thoroughly and verify this?
Representative Quam, if I understand what your inquiry is, you're wanting to know if that system was within the scope of this particular assignment that the legislature gave to the...
Mr. Chair, no, because this was on voter registration, and in the discussion, in the report, they touched on verification of voters, both existing, whether they were challenged, they moved, so verification of the voter registration system, and this is a non-trivial component that is required. It's set up in HAVA, and the federal government has this site which states are utilizing. So I'm trying to understand
before you interrupted
if that
me
was
when I was
included.
making my statement, I'm going to interrupt you, and let's just ask the auditors instead of you and I discussing something that neither one of us has firsthand knowledge of. Ms. Meyerhoff, I know that a similar or same question was asked, and I'll ask you to respond once again if you would like to. You've heard some of the interchange between Representative Quam and myself.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I've been trying to look in our report to see if there's anything that even sort of touches on the question that Representative Quam has raised. And while we did talk about the verification process, we didn't break out the number of election day registrants and whether they were verified or not. What I might direct your attention to, although I don't think this directly answers Representative Quam's question, is in Appendix B of the report, which would be page 83. We had asked the Secretary of State's office for the status of all of the voter records in the statewide voter registration system in August 2017. And that
Ms.
indicates...
Meyerhoff, page 83, I don't know if we necessarily have in the report at page 83, we have some letters that are in the back, I think
It's
that.
about 5 pages from the back. I just have
It
to
would
find
be
it.
83. There's no number on it. It's the Appendix B.
Very good. Thank
Sorry
you.
about that confusion. And so if someone doesn't pass verification through the processes that the statewide voter registration system uses, they would be challenged. And we have the challenged reasons listed here as of August 2017, which is after the 2016 election. And challenged for unverifiable would be in that other category, 4,856, but there are other challenge reasons in there. That's where they would be.
Thank you. Representative Quam, follow up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. When I looked at this over the, past week since this was available, I noticed that if we did use that 48, just under 4,900, there's no way that over 16,000 mismatch would fit in a smaller number than 16,000. So that's where I thought that maybe this had not made it into this report. And that's why I'm trying to understand, you're summarizing, you're grouping things data-wise here and there. But, again, if it's over 16,000, that's a pretty good-sized chunk of, I know a lot of people statewide don't mind having that kind of a margin or better. And we've had races that were closer. And that's why I bring it up is it stuck out as there's something missing in the story. And I wanted, to find out if it was missing because they weren't aware of and didn't have that information from the Secretary of State's when they did the audit, or if it was classified somewhere else. And apparently, I don't think the auditors happened to have picked up on this.
Wow, amazing, unbelievable. This should, it was later categorized as this not being a type of situation where, because there's federal money now coming in to upgrade the voter system, like the licensing system. But however, it's exactly what you have going where we had a legislative audit on our voting system and voter registration, and they didn't do their job. They didn't, and of course, in my opinion, what they did is they just took the information that the Secretary of State gave them and went with that. But even with that, it's appalling because in this slideshow they presented, they said 602 persons were challenged due to a felony conviction. Those 602 voted, 612 voted in 2016. 612 people who were felons, known felons, voted in 2016. That is a huge number. We've had statewide races that have been won with less of a margin than that, half the margin. Even two-thirds the margin, a third the margin. Statewide races. So 612 felons voted, and they're not supposed to vote. And here we find out with this questioning from Representative Quam that there's this HAVA, and I just forgot what that meant, Help America Vote Act, that the federal government has set up a system to help check. But here in this report, 17,882 people where the Secretary of State, after same-day registration, well, actually, these were challenged voters because last year, or the last time they voted, the postcard went out, and guess what? Those people didn't live there. The postcard came back. Okay, so they have this way of checking, but those 17,000 people get to vote. And my understanding is in prior years, 47,000 people voted that we have no idea whether they're legal voters or not. And there is an easy solution to this. And the solution is if you're a challenged voter, you do the provisional ballot. Okay? So 612 challenged felons went in and swore, I have the right to vote. I am off my felon list. But 612 of them weren't. Okay? So what good does swearing an oath do? So our system has been corrupted. They're not doing the checks and balances. Steve Simon is fighting every single lawsuit against him for not disclosing information. He needs to disclose it. I know there's FOIA requests now going in with the federal government to check the state. This is going to blow up big time. You're hearing it first. Our election system in Minnesota is corrupted, but not because of the system, because of the people running the system. And Steve Simon may say, hey, we got a good group of people here, and they're volunteering and they're doing good work. Yes, they are. But the information you're giving them and the laws and the way you're interpreting the laws and supporting them is making them do a bad job and allowing people who are not eligible to vote. I have also some comments on Representative O'Driscoll's behavior. He just wanted to get through this hearing. You saw a little bit of it. He says, I don't see any questions. Well, the person just finished. Instead, let's ask, anybody have any questions? He goes, I don't see any questions. He's trying to send a message. And then him to mischaracterize Representative Quam's statement was an intentional mischaracterization. And so from what I'm hearing, the attitude of O'Driscoll there is, I'm just on this committee to, get a paycheck type of thing. And this voting system thing, he's not really out there to have integrity in our voting system. And I was surprised at the other legislators' reaction on that committee, that they weren't appalled that we got all these unaccounted voters voting. It's appalling. And so if you want to have integrity in your voting system, which is, boy, what do they say in their letter here? Find it. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy. Well, we're a republic. It permits eligible United States citizens to elect who will represent them in federal, state, and local offices. Well, act like it. Pass laws that support that, and a provisional ballot will go a long, long way. And that way, if a person then finds out the state finds out they are eligible, then their vote counts, rather than their vote counts and then we find out they're not eligible. So big deal going on there. So we'll see if there's any follow-up, but there could have been a whole ton of tougher questions. And so sham report, lazy work from the Legislative Auditor's Department. It's disgusting. Okay, cameras in the courtroom. We got some video here. Okay, we're going to start with number 23. And this is what they're trying to do is take away your right to have cameras in the courtroom so you can see what's going on in the courtroom, in particularly sentencing of criminals. They're doing the right thing by having the legislature write the rules, but the legislature is writing rules to eliminate the cameras rather than opening it up so that there are cameras in the courtroom. So here, let's see what number 23.
Mr. Anfinson, this has been a slow creep of the court, and you've been talking about how this pilot project started off as civil and then has moved to criminal. So it's clear that that's the direction that the court is going to. And so while you may be specifically talking about the court rule as it is at this minute, that doesn't mean that there isn't a need for the state legislature to decide on a matter of public policy whether or not we should weigh in on whether or not we think victims or defendants should have a substantive right. You have made it clear that for 30 years other states have been doing this, so it's clear the direction you would like to see the state go. So, Mr. Anfinson, do you believe it's improper for this legislature to decide if a victim or defendant should have a substantive right in the courtroom with relationship to cameras in the courtroom? Or do you believe that's solely within the discretion of the court?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hillstrom, I know what you want me to say, Representative Hillstrom, but I'm not going to say it. The legislature has absolutely no right to get involved in this issue. How's that? No, that's not my position at all. Of course the legislature should have concern about this issue. My response to that question is that there's no imaginable, empirically justifiable reason for the legislature to enter this topic now. The Supreme Court has already done it. You talked about the Supreme Court's slow creep on this issue. I think that exaggerates the speed with which they're proceeding. I have been very frustrated with the court, to be candid with you. I think they should move faster and further with allowing members of the public to see what happens in criminal courtrooms. But they haven't. And the singular, overwhelming, emphatic concern of the court for 10 years has been protecting victims and witnesses. Why would anyone think they're going to suddenly change? Especially when they have a majority of Democrats on the court now. That's a shot, Representative Hillstrom.
It's just beginning here now. But a substantive right, okay, there's, again, we talked about it last time, there's fundamental rights, press, public hearing, face your accusers. Okay, those are fundamental rights. Well, with the substantive right that Representative Hillstrom's trying to bring in there, gets rid of those rights of the press, of the facing your accuser. It's undermining those rights where the substantive right becomes more important than a fundamental right, and that's too bad. And it shouldn't be, and the public hearing or the public trial, so that people can't see what's going on in the courtroom. You got to be, either you're there to see what's going on or you're not. If you're not there, you miss out. You got to rely on other people if they show up. And Mr. Anfinson's been down there a long time, and he jokes around, you know, and as many people do down there. And some people don't get it. All right, let's go to number 24.
Mr. Anfinson, if this were reversed, if the legislature was weighing in and saying absolutely every courtroom should be open to every court, every jury should be able to be videoed, every victim should be able to be videoed, every defendant, would you be supporting that proposal if we were flipping it? Would you be saying we, the legislature, should be driving to allow you to be in the courtroom more?
Mr. Anfinson?
Mr. Chair, Representative Hillstrom, I certainly would be. And the reason I would support it is because it would be doing a great service to your constituents so they can see what good work the courts do. People don't understand how impressive the district courts of this state normally are. And they can't see that unless they can see it on television or on websites. And so the reason I would support that flip, as you call it, Representative Hillstrom, is because, again, as I've said, in 40 states for 30 years, there has been no documented evidence of any problem for anyone, including victims and witnesses. But I respect especially the victim testimony, and I don't personally have the slightest problem with placing restrictions on placing them on camera. But that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with the court. It hasn't happened in 10 years. It's not going to happen in the next 10 years.
All right, well, a very good comeback. I would agree with them. There's no reason for the courtroom, for the press not to be in there. That's our Constitution. Believe me, it will protect the judiciary. It protects everybody, okay? Because there are people out there who, in the press, who love to lie and to love to mischaracterize and turn truth into falsehoods or falsehoods into truth, you know? Based on what they say. Well, I got to believe this person. They were there. Well, no, you don't. It'd be much better for you to see what happened, and then you can make up your own mind. And that's why I go down and film in the courtrooms. That's why I go down and film at the legislature, so you could see it. Now, you've heard my editing and my comments and stuff like that. Well, soon, the legislature hearing that you just saw on the voter registration will be online, and you could watch it. The audio is online already from the legislative website, but you can hear it, and you can then soon see what's going on down there, and you can make up your own mind. You don't have to have me be the filter, although that'd be a good choice. Okay, let's go to number 25.
And the other concern here, Representative Hellstrom, is we're not just talking about limiting camera coverage of a victim. This amendment that has been placed on the bill this morning demolishes any real prospect of camera coverage of criminal proceedings. That's a disservice to the residents of the state.
Yeah, it really is. So the purpose of getting it back to the legislature, which it should have been in the first place, was to stop the court from permitting people being able to see sentencing hearing. And there was just one on TV last night, and you just got part of it. That's how they choose to do it. It's not how I would choose to do it, but I couldn't be down there to film it, and you get your little bit, and that's how it works. If the courts had a system where they filmed them, you'd be able to watch it all. Okay, let's go to 27. This is Representative Finn, who can't take a joke too easily.
So first, I just want to say that this isn't a joke. What happens in a criminal proceeding is a very serious thing for the parties directly involved. And I understand that it can be entertaining or interesting to people, but ultimately I think that our justice system should be focused on achieving justice. And I think that your testimony particularly is a prime example of how people act differently when they're performing for the public or believe that the public is watching. And so I think that, you keep saying that nobody has a problem with it, and that you respect the testimony of the prior testifiers, but those things, that doesn't even make sense. If you truly respect the testimony of the prior testifiers, then you would give their testimony credence.
Let's go to number 30, because this is Atkinson's response. And this is a prosecutor, of course, former prosecutor, or maybe currently, mischaracterizing what he said. And of course, prosecutors know how to do that. But it's very important. It's important for the person that's being convicted or on trial to be able to defend themselves. And part of being able to cross-examine the witness is because the witness may be wrong. And people may see that witness and go, whoa, I was there. Oh, that reminds me of this person said, and there may be other witnesses for the defense. It goes both ways on this deal. But the thing is we the people get to decide. And the government's to be transparent, and this cuts out transparency. Let's go to number 30 and hear Atkinson's response.
Representative, you mischaracterized my testimony. You do so in a fairly fundamental way. I never said nobody cares. What I said was there are no facts that have been acquired in 30 years of extensive camera coverage in this country showing any of the impacts, in fact, have happened that the proponents of the bill describe. I care deeply about the victims. I have spent hours and hours and hours over the last several years in promoting camera coverage through the Supreme Court and talking to victims' advocates who have convinced me this is a big issue, and I respect it deeply. And it's not my testimony as you've described it. This is a big concern. But when you talk about why shouldn't the people affected be allowed to decide, who is affected when there's a serial rapist at loose in the community? Who is affected when there are murderers killing children in the community? Is that just the victim? Is that just the witness? Or is it the community itself who's affected? And when you see a person who commits a terrible crime like that brought before a court, brought before a district court judge, and sentenced to life in prison, that provides an enormous community benefit. Those are the people affected. It's a huge catharsis. It's reassurance that our justice system works. It's a demonstration that we live in a society that gets people like that and puts them away. That's
Well, you know what's interesting is the filming of this, I believe it was this Thompson guy, I don't remember the name, but who was convicted and sentenced. And he killed an 85-year-old man, and he blamed it on his upbringing and his poorness and stuff like that. You got to see him deny what he did and get not be mournful over the 85-year-old being killed. He didn't take responsibility for his actions. You saw that. But on the other hand, I filmed another sentence that Dee Evervold got sentenced, and she raised, Judge, Your Honor, this whole sentencing was a sham because I didn't get all my evidence that showed that I reasonably believed that the county didn't give me all the evidence of all these reports that were done. Never gave them to me. I have a right to that information. I have the right to this exculpatory evidence would show that these girls were in fear of abuse of their father. And I didn't get that. And then you hear the prosecutor go, well, Your Honor, we gave her more than enough. Well, but they didn't answer the question. And of course, the judge, all during the trial, refused to answer that question, you got all your evidence. And she didn't. She didn't get it all, and that's known. Okay, didn't get the month of evidence where the girls were re-educated down in California and what they were told and what the psychologists report. Did have a report that's the girls saying, hey, the judge is terrible, my dad's abusing us and we're afraid of him and that's why we ran. Okay, there's a video out on the website saying that, but guess what? That wasn't allowed in as evidence because it'd be prejudicial. Okay, which would have found the people not guilty, of assisting runaways. Okay, but the law says you get to assist runaways if you're afraid of abuse and have reasonable belief that they're being abused. So you get to see some of this action. You get to hear what people are thinking and what's going on, and then you could respond to it in a matter of, hey, what should we do about this? Something seems wrong. We need to raise some of these issues. What's going on? And get some of these things answered. Because it will be you. And you think you have rights? And you think you have these things? You don't have rights. I mean, look at the attorney-client privilege. Just totally blown away, by federal prosecutors. Totally blown away. You're the president of the United States. You don't have rights. We can do whatever we want. We can break this still. And people are saying, well, it must have been looked into and researched and thoroughly vetted before they allowed this to happen. Baloney. It doesn't happen that way. If they want to get you, they'll get you, and they don't care. And the only recourse you have is being able to get that information out in the public and having people seeing it. And that's why you need cameras in the courtroom, because then your message can get out. Okay, let's go to 33 and play that. This is Representative Frankie talking about it being a bipartisan issue.
I just wanted to make a brief statement to something Mr. Amundson had said. You don't really need to respond to this, Mr. Amundson, but the shot at the Democrat courts and Democrats insinuating that this is a partisan bill, and people understand that this is brought forward by the chair of Ways and Means, who is Republican and co-authored by Representative Hillstrom, who is DFL. I just think that needed to be reiterated and pointed out that even though sometimes I would like to take shots at the DFL myself, this was not the appropriate time to do so in context with this bill. So to remind people that this has bipartisan support. Thank you.
All right. Okay, you don't need to respond. Really? You make a shot like that and you say you don't need to respond. Well, guess what? Mr. Anderson respond. So let's see what he has to say. Number 34.
Mr. Chairman, could I respond to that? I'll be brief. Mr. Chair, Representative, it is always a treacherous gambit to use humor either in a courtroom or a legislative hearing. And I have testified here for 30 years. I understand that better than most people. I nonetheless occasionally try and inject a little humor. Not because I have any disrespect for the authors of this bill, not because I have any respect for the court. I didn't seriously mean that a Democratic Supreme Court would be different on this than anyone else. And Representative Knobloch is well known as a Republican to me. This is a bipartisan bill. And it's nice to see that over here. But in no sense that I mean disrespect or suggest this is some kind of a partisan effort. It's not. I know that.
The big thing here is it shouldn't be bipartisan. But and actually it isn't bipartisan. These are the rhinos, Knobloch, O'Driscoll. These are people, and unfortunately, Republican representatives have no clue of what's going on in this committee. This is the Public Safety Committee, where, yeah, it's bipartisan, but it's against you. It's against you, the people. It's against your knowledge and what you need to know about the courts. And that's the sad part of this. Sure, bipartisan, that's really sad. Because something's bipartisan doesn't mean it's good. Okay? So, number 35, Representative Considine actually ends up being abusive to Mr. Anfinson. Let's hear this.
And please don't respond. If somebody wants to see how well our district courts work, they can simply drive down and sit in the back. This is reality TV, and that's all it is. Thank you.
What a stupid man. I'm sorry, this guy is an abusive man. Please don't respond. That's the very time Mr. Anfinson needed to respond. So he used his position as a legislator to talk Mr. Anfinson into not speaking, and he didn't respond. Okay? This whole idea, just go down to the courtroom and watch. Well, you got a job. Courtroom only operates between 9 and 4:30, if they're lucky. Okay? When you going to get down there to get it? You can't see what's going on down there. So what's this? It's just reality TV. No, it's your liberties at stake. Every person that's coming into that courtroom is liberties at stake. It's serious business. So a camera in the court makes it reality TV. There's already cameras in every courtroom anyway. So it doesn't make it reality TV. It's serious stuff going on. It protects the victim and it protects the accused, or it could. And what's the court supposed to be there? You could counter a person's victim, a so-called victim, we don't know that they're a victim until it's over, counter a victim's testimony, or find out that the accused is really guilty. But these judges can throw the case very easily anyway. Okay, let's go to number 38. Play that one. This is Representative Pinto.
I just want to build on Chair Knobloch's point that it's striking to me that even this really small rule that Mr. Anfinson is talking about, even that is opposed by a number of people looking at it, giving the reasons that the Chair Knobloch provided. On the other side, if members look at the report, the support for expanding the rule is, well, in general, we haven't seen too many problems. And I found it really striking in Mr. Anfinson's testimony that I believe he said there are no serious negative impacts, and on the other hand, it benefits the courts. And I find that striking that it does feel to me that we can be focusing a lot on this individual narrow rule, but it is clear in the testimony that the hope is that the path, we do continue down this path, that we do have a flip, so that we do have this, we are expanding this. And when you look at the reasons for it, there doesn't seem to be much of a benefit for public education for this narrow piece. And of course, the argument's going to be made that we need to have more and more of it. And then on the other hand, the negative consequences come.
But there are no negative consequences. And he mischaracterized the statement, saying no severe negative impacts. He didn't say that. Over 30 years, there's been no negative impacts. Okay? So here at Pinto, I believe another, and definitely another attorney, but potentially a prosecutor here, re-characterizing somebody's testimony as to the case. There has been no negative impact that we know of. Okay, so there's Mr. Pinto saying, oh, but there's going to be, when there hasn't been. So it's this irrational thinking, but it's really not irrational. I mean, what they're doing is they have an agenda, close courts. That's their agenda. We don't want the people to see what's going in. I'm a prosecutor. I don't want to see people how good I am, or is it how bad I am. I don't want people to see that. I mean, I did film a civil case, Minnesota Voters Alliance versus Steve Simon, Secretary of State. Secretary of State's attorney got beat up pretty good. And in that case, you know, you can go online and watch it, Speechless MN on YouTube there, youtube.com/SpeechlessMN. All right, let's see, we got a couple more I wanted to see. Let's go to number 40. Separate, oh, we don't have time, do we? We've got about a minute left. All right. People right now, open government. Hal Davis was there testifying for media. This is about open government, and he testified about all the states that have cameras in the courtroom. And it's been beneficial, not hurtful. And you need to have it, and you need to see it. So this is a battle worth fighting for, because pretty soon, in my opinion, the courts have already in a position where they've had to cover up so much of their corruption that it's about to pop, or they're themselves about to get violent and take people in for mental exams or who knows, whatever, and take away your liberty and take you to re-education camps and do all kinds of things like that. The court, especially Dakota County, is pretty bad. All right, remember, if you don't stand up for other people's liberties, who's going to stand up for yours? And good men don't do nothing. God bless. Have a great week.